Welcome, everybody. It's always enjoyable to have a lunch talk where you have standing room only. It doesn't always happen, so this is exciting. And I know we're joined by some students from Harris. This is actually a joint event between the law school and with the Harris School. And actually the project that we'll be talking about today is also a joint event, so it's really been a wonderful collaboration. My name is Claudia Flores. I am the director of the International Human Rights Clinic here at the law school, and also on the clinical faculty. I'm really here to introduce Salman Sufi, who will be talking to us today about an anti-violence against women initiative in Punjab. This is actually a project that the clinic here, the International Human Rights Clinic, has been working on for the last year, assisting the government of Punjab in developing standard operating procedures for this initiative. It's a very ambitious initiative that I'll really let Salman talk to you about. But we have been very fortunate to be able to participate in this, and this domestic violence center, I won't call it a shelter because it's really kind of a multi-service organization that is going to try to address violence against women in Punjab in a very holistic and human rights focused kind of way, is opening at the end of February. So we're really here at the beginning of really what could be a game changer for violence against women in that region. So without saying more, I'm going to introduce Salman to you. He's going to give us an overview of what the law that was passed in 2016 required and what the center is going to look like and what it hopes to accomplish. Hopefully he can discuss some of the challenges and some of the nuances that the government has been thinking about. And then we'll be joined by Ali Hugi, who is a student in the International Human Rights Clinic and one of the two students that has been working on the support that we've been providing to the government. She'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the project, and then we can have a question and answer session and just have a discussion. So this is Salman Sufi. He's advisor to the Punjab Chief Minister Law and Order's Office. And he is really I think the brainchild, can I call you the brainchild behind this initiative, and has been working very hard to make sure that it's implemented in the right way. So Salman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello. My name is Salman Sufi. I am from Chicago, but I'm working in Pakistan as a volunteer for the government of Punjab. I joined the government back in 2014, just out of sheer curiosity how to try to influence the public policies of the government of Punjab in a positive way, try to bring something positive in Pakistan, especially in the fields of law and order and especially violence against women. So violence against women, I would like to talk about it, how do we define violence against women? What is violence against women? Because it's a constantly evolving thing. I believe that violence against women is a victim of its own merits. Like, it has been talked about throughout the world. It has been talked about in colleges, universities. It has been mostly talked about in NGOs and different organizations. But different governments always have a take on it, which is always, divorced from the reality. They come up with their legislations, but those legislations are always disconnected. So the real victims, the people who go through the violence, are always not at the beneficiary end of it. So we wanted to see that geographically, socioeconomically, how can we address violence against women in a way that it directly hits a core, and it actually helps the victims of violence and actually prevents the violence before it's happening. So I will start the presentation by explaining some things, that violence against women is not just limited to a certain aspect of society. If I talk about Pakistan, if I talk about India, if I talk about Bangladesh, they all have a similar socioeconomic background. They were all, India and Pakistan gained their independence in 1947 and Bangladesh in 1970s. But similarly, they have the same kind of problems that they face. Their society fabric is the same. Their lower middle class, their higher echelon of the society is the same. But violence against women is similar in all stratas of the society. The only difference is the minorities and the lower middle class of the society. When they face violence against women, it's always out in the public. People are talking about it. People are addressing it. But the upper echelons of the society, throughout their career, throughout their political career, with their money, with their influence, they're able to influence the court processes. They're able to influence the case itself, and most of the time, they're able to influence the victim to retract the case. So that was a major issue that we were facing, that no matter how many amount of legislations you do, no matter how many amount of seminars you hold, no matter how much amount of money you invest in violence against women, curbing violence against women, it never gets to the real effect because of all of these issues. So the impact of women empowerment and violence against women was so strange and so strong that when I started this study on terrorism cases, like when I talk about terrorism, like most people, like they don't understand that there's a strong connection between violence against women and terrorism, which is happening in Pakistan or India or Afghanistan as we speak. We took case studies of at least 50 to 100 people who blew themselves up in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and we went inside their houses. We identified the issues that they were facing inside their homes, and we were able to identify that there was a lot of domestic violence happening from where these people came from. Their houses were broken, the families were not together as they were supposed to. There was a male authoritarian regime in there, and women, their mothers, their sisters were always on the sidebars, and they were never participating in the actual grooming of the male. So that was a big issue that that was contributing to that fact. So that was a very interesting find that we have identified, and it was so important that even United Nations started a program to link this global wave of terrorism to violence against women. Next slide, please. Next section. So when we talk about Pakistan, we have 49% of our population which are women, but we were not able to give them the protection. We were not able to come up with a strategy which addresses the violence with its core. There were similar legislations passed in Pakistan. One was passed in the province of Sindh. Pakistan has 4 provinces. One was passed in the province of Sindh. One was passed in the province of Balochistan. But from the date they were passed till today, if you see at the conviction rates were only 1%. And the actual cases that were brought to court, which were they amounted to nothing because those legislations were relying on the same old structures, the same old departments to implement the legislation, and they were merely made just to satisfy the strata of the society, which is called the NGOs, which is called the civil society, that yes, we are doing something about curbing violence against women, but it was not something which actually reached the masses. So when we started, working on Punjab Protection of Violence Against Women Act, which I drafted with my, colleague here, Hafsa Rahman, who is a student at University of Chicago at the moment, we looked at the situation as a whole. We identified that the Violence Against Women bill that was in the process was only dealing with domestic violence. But we identified that domestic violence is just one aspect of violence against women. There are a lot of forms of violence which women go through, especially in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So we had to cater to all of that. So it took us 1.5 years to draft this legislation, and we were able to include some pretty significant areas of violence against women into it, such as psychological violence, such as cyber violence, such as sexual violence, such as economic abuse, and such as psychological abuse. In Pakistan, Pakistan was ranked third most dangerous country in the world when it came to violence against women. You can see the figures, they're quite horrible. That's 6 murders or attempt to murders, 8 rapes, 11 battery and assaults, and 32 abduction. And this is just the province of Punjab. And the conviction rate for all of these crimes was only 1 to 2.5%, and only 50% of 3,600 cases actually went to court because the victims were forced, victims were pressured upon to retract their testimony, to retract the cases, and the case process was so cumbersome that they just could not go through with it. And out of 9,808 cases of DNA, the results, 84% were negative, 15% were positive, and 1% were irrelevant because the DNA was collected after 24 hours of the assault. These are the basic changes. These are the basic elements of any prosecution that we have a laboratory. We have a laboratory for forensic science, but we were not able to get the results because the people collecting the evidence were not equipped. They were not trained. So only 15% of the DNA evidence was positive. it's an interesting thing that I was just going through the case notes of O.J. Simpson trial, which happened, a decade ago. And back then, when O.J. was on trial as well, the DNA part was so crucial, but it was so at the initial stages of prosecution that nobody was even taking that seriously. And the case, even though the DNA was proven that it was O.J. Simpson's DNA, but they could not convict him because the DNA, the element of the DNA, the conviction was so new and so flawed that nobody actually, cared to probe that further. So now it's 2017, and we have the laboratory, we have everything that we were able to, collect the DNA, but the subject was not comfortable. The way they were collecting the DNA was not, the way it was supposed to be. So that's why we were not able to get the results that we were looking for. The solution, the case issue was so severe that in Pakistan, for example, if a rape case happened and the case flow process was so cumbersome that the chief executive of the province had to personally go just to get a simple case of police case registered for the rape. So the situation was so out of hand that we had to come up with a solution which actually caters to the problem. And the factors that were contributing to the justice delivery gap was disconnected evidence collection, non-violence against women specific training, non-availability of personnel, and societal standards and norms, and victims' retraction. Next slide, please. In non-cognizable offenses, the case was that if the crime has happened, it was supposed to go to the police, then police sends it to medical examination, and if the medical examination the doctor says that there is no rape or there is no assault, the police simply refuse to register the case. And most of the doctors were male, so female victims were reluctant to go to the hospitals to begin with. And if the crime happened at midnight, the hospitals were under-equipped, understaffed, so they had to wait for 24 to 36 hours just to get a medical done. So you can well imagine that this case flow process became such a snake and ladder game that I personally interviewed some of the victims, and they said that we would rather go through assault rather than going through this process because this is such a lengthy process and we are just simply not comfortable going through it. Next slide, please. So when we started drafting the Women Protection Act, the Punjab Protection of Women Against Violence Act, we kept all of these elements in check, and we provided the solutions to all of these problems. For example, we covered the issues like psychological, economic, domestic abuse, which were never covered in the history of Pakistan. We came up with our own implementation mechanism, which is a major issue in Pakistan or India or actually anywhere in the world, that we are obviously relying on the old departments, police or courts to implement new forms of legislation. They're not equipped, they're not trained, so they are unable to carry forward the new changes that are coming into the evolving society. So we came up with our own implementation mechanism. Then we provided civil remedies. In Pakistan's criminal penal code, the criminal penalties were obviously and always present for rape, for assault, but there was no civil remedy present. So we came up with civil remedies which are easier to get in a family court system, and the family courts are able to deliver the justice or the verdict within 30 to 60 days, rather than if you go through a criminal court, it takes 90 to 120 days just to get that done. Then we came up with the mediation mechanism, because in a society like Pakistan, mediation is given a strong role because of the societal pressure. So we wanted to make sure that if it's not an aggressive case, if it's not a case which is like very of a grave violence, so we can provide the victim with mediation mechanism, but that mediation should be done recorded. It should be audio and visually recorded. So if the defendant goes back to the old ways, then we have the proof that we provided a mechanism for mediation, but it's simply not working. So now the case has to go to criminal court. Then we provided shelter homes through this Punjab Protection of Women Against Violence Act. The three civil remedies that I was discussing before, one is protection order. For example, if I assault someone in Pakistan and they go to court, there is no mechanism present for them to seek protection from me till the case is in the court. So if I try to intimidate them, if I try to bully them to take the case back, they have simply no way to counter that. I'll give you an example. There was a high-profile murder which happened 3 to 4 months ago, actually 6 months ago. There was a social media model called Kandil Baloch. She was very vocal, she was very aggressive, she was very outspoken on women's rights, and she was murdered by her own brother. And just 1 week before the murder, she went to the police to seek protection, but police was unable to provide protection because they thought it's a domestic issue and they should resolve it within their own household. So after 1 week, the brother was able to kill the girl inside her own house. So when we came with protection order, this protection order works just like a restraining order, that if some girl is looking for protection from someone, the court passes the protection order and that guy or that girl has to stay away from the victim till the case is in process or till the case is decided. So, and this is enforced by a GPS tracked anklet bracelet, which was a big deal when we introduced it in a country like Pakistan, and we faced a lot of criticism, we faced a lot of backlash from religious clerics because they thought it's an affront to the male dominant society. We came out with this opposition that if you put this anklet bracelet on the victim, the household will get stigmatized. But we had a very logical answer to that, that how about the victim? Like if the person is trying to intimidate someone, assault someone, the first protection, it's supposed to be for the victim, not the defendant. So the defendant, while the case is in process, has to stay away from the victim for obvious purposes, so the victim can stay the course, she can go to court, and she can go to court without any fear, without any intimidation. So the protection order provides her with that protection. Then residence order is a very big element of this protection, the Punjab Protection of Women Against Violence Act. With the growing economy, there was a lot of women in Pakistan which were coming to work, they were starting their own business, they were going to school. So the issues arose that if they were earning, their own families started to rely on that income, and they were not they stopped working, and they were hogging onto the money that the female was making. So we came up, I'm sorry, that's a monetary order. So we came up with the monetary order, so that if a person is trying to earn some living and she has a car to her name, she has jewelry to her name, she has a property to her name, nobody can take that away. And if somebody takes that away, the court can give her back her rights, and court can pass an order that her salary, her wages should stay with her. Then residence order is an issue that women in Pakistan always face, that they used to be kicked out of the house at midnight for a small domestic dispute and they had nowhere to go. So we provided them with the residence order that if they get kicked out, they can go to the court, and the government is supposed to provide them with the shelter while the case is in process, and the court can pass an order to get them back to the house from where they're evicted. And if they feel that their life is under threat from that household, then the court can pass an order that the defendant has to be evicted for 48 hours and not the victim. So this residence order provides her with the protection that was not available to her before. Then comes the implementation. As I was discussing, that if you depend on old mechanisms, on old departments, you cannot expect them to deliver something which is brand new. It takes a huge amount of training. It takes a huge amount of mindset change to embrace new changes. And the public who are at the front of these kind of assaults simply cannot wait for government to just train their personnel for 1 or 2 years just to implement a brand new law. So we came up with our own Violence Against Women Center. This is a one-stop shop, which is for the first time it's happening in South Asia and Middle East and Europe, that we are able to bring all the justice delivery departments under one roof. So the moment there's a crime happened, there's a toll-free number that the victim calls. We bring her to this shelter. The first aid is provided right there. The FIR, which is the first information report for the police, is done right there. The prosecutor is stationed right there to assist the police with the relevant clauses. Medical examination is done right there, and forensics is collecting the evidence right there. And then we don't stop there. We also provide them with post-trauma rehabilitation. We also provide them with a psychologist, and we also provide provide them with shelter homes so they can be comfortable and they can go back to the society as an independent woman rather than a dependent woman. This Violence Against Women Center is manned by all female staff which are trained not only psychologically but also technologically. And I'll give you an example that I interviewed over 100 doctors to be deployed at these centers, and we refused or rejected around 98 to 99 of them. The reason why, because the first question that I asked them was like, if a victim comes to you with the allegation of assault or rape, what is the first question that you're going to ask him? And most of them answered that first we will see how she's dressed, and then we will advise her that you need to change your dress code, or you need to be more modest in order to avoid this. So that was a major issue for a country like Pakistan. So we wanted to make sure that we only bring those kind of quality human resource who simply do their job as they're supposed to. And it's not their job to morally correct someone. It's not their job to tell someone how to live. It's their job to simply conduct a simple medical legal examination and get the case forward. So the SOPs that we are developing with the help of the University of Chicago Law School are specifically for these purposes, that we are trying to make sure that we maintain international human rights standards, we maintain the international standards for investigation, prosecution, and police, and we make sure that nobody is judged, everyone is given a fair trial, and everyone is given the comfort that they can come into this center and they can simply feel comfortable that their case will be heard on strictly merits. Next slide, please. And all of these departments that I mentioned, we have developed a special software to connect them. So just imagine that if you go to a police station or precinct here in the United States, and the court is connected with that precinct, the hospital is connected with that police station, and the prosecutor is connected with that police station. So everything is done, electronically with the lesser amount of paper trail, and the issue that we were facing, that people used to forged documents, that will be taken care of, because, for example, at 1:05 p.m., if I write that Salman Sufi committed this, act of violence, and after half an hour, through some political influence or some bribery, if I try to change that statement, if I'm a government official, with this system, we will have the record of both of the entries. So when the case goes to court, we can present evidence that, okay, this official, tried to amend the original, complaint. They tried to mess with the system. So we have both records, and it's all monitored through video and audio as well. And each keystroke is being monitored in a separate building, in a separate, software house that we have established in Pakistan. So all of this will be recorded, and it will be kept there for the court purposes. Then the highest number of violence against women cases were reported in a district called Multan. This is the south of Punjab. And so we decided to make the first center there. This is the first center. It's ready. As you can see, the building, it's a brand new facility. It's a state-of-the-art facility, and this will serve as the headquarter for all of the Punjab province, for all the domestic and sexual violence cases that come in here. All of the departments in that I just spoke, they have their own customized building according to their own requirements, and the victim will be it will be very easy for her to navigate the complex judicial system in this center. Next slide, please. Then we didn't stop there. The issue was that because we are technocrats, we don't belong to the civil service, we don't belong to the political parties that run the governments. We wanted to make the system sustainable. So we came up with the idea of a Women Protection Authority, a specific authority created just for the purposes of implementation of Violence Against Women Act and establishment of Violence Against Women centers. So regardless of which government is there, regardless, today it's Mr. A, B, C, and tomorrow it's XYZ, this system is embedded into the law, so these technocrats will be able to sustain, and these technocrats, with the help of civil society, will be able to implement the legislation and make sure that the Violence Against Women centers are working correctly. Then we created Pakistan's first ever Assistant Inspector General Police, a Women Protection post, which is the highest officer in the Central Police Office of Punjab, and she will be basically monitoring all the violence against women cases cases throughout the province of Punjab, because because to counter the political influence that they usually face in the smaller districts and the rural areas. Then our other women-centric reforms, we started Pakistan's first Women on Wheels campaign. There was no concept of girls riding motorbikes in Pakistan before, so we started this campaign with only 45 girls, and now we are at 2,500. We have trained them in urban areas, in rural areas, and now we're in the process of giving them $8 million worth of grant to buy their own motorcycles. So just imagine the impact if 49% of your population comes on road, they're independent, they're mobile, they're working, they're going to school, they're taking care of their houses, they're taking care of their jobs, their businesses. So the economic impact of this scheme will be tremendous, and that will also empower them to come out and talk about the abuse or any issue that they're facing otherwise. Then we started on the prevention side of violence, that we added chapters on gender-based violence throughout 8th through 12th grade. So we wanted to make sure that when kids are reading about these chapters and they grow up, so they don't condone or they don't accept violence. So we prevent violence rather than only providing a cure for it. This was also a big step for a country like Pakistan, because whenever you touch curriculum anywhere in the world, there's a lot of civil society participation. There's a lot of religious religious parties which try to influence the process. It's anywhere in the world. So we were successfully able to do that, and we gave examples of all sorts of women leaders, including Benazir Bhutto, including Malala Yousafzai, including Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, and including Islam as itself, that in Islam it's not right to abuse women. So the society that follows this religion, they can see with examples, and they can see with transcripts that if somebody is trying to teach them otherwise, that women are inferior to you, or it's okay for you to rule women, that is simply not the case, and you have been this is the correct version of things. Then we launched an anti-harassment Android application through which not only you can report crimes, but you can also report the areas which you think are prone to crimes. For example, if you're walking down a street in Chicago and you see that there's no lights there, you can see unsavory characters there, so you can mark that area through that app, and the government then takes action on rectifying that issue. Then as I was discussing about the alternative form of government, that you have to come up with new form of departments to implement new legislations. In Pakistan or anywhere in the world, whenever the administration changes, just like we just have had elections in US, the DHS is grappling with the executive orders that the United States president has passed on the immigration, because they are so used to working in a certain mindset, which with each administrative change, the society, the segments of the society who work in the government, it's not easy for them to grasp onto the new concepts so quickly. So we came up with a new approach of creating alternative structures within the government who are based on technocrats and who work side and side with the political party, with the political leadership and the executive branch, to implement the new changes that are coming into the society, to make sure that they're done with the the help of civil society. So just imagine that if there is a part of civil society within the US who is against any of the executive order that is being passed right now, but with this kind of strategy, they actually have a say within the government, rather than going to the airports to set up counters with the ACLU or doing processions. They have a direct say within the government, and they can actually implement and influence the government decisions from within, rather than sitting outside. So this strategic reform unit that we are heading, this is first of its kind approach in Pakistan, and we directly work with the chief minister of the province, and we basically simply go to him with whatever information or innovation that he's trying to gather from the society. We give him the first look of how the society is reacting to the executive orders, how the society is reacting to the things that government is doing, and with the help of this strategic reform unit, we were able to pass 9 legislations within one and a half years, and around 30 reforms. This also connects the civil society with the government as well. So this is the end of the presentation, and I would again like to thank Claudia and you guys for coming, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
So So I think this is a very holistic sort of summary of the efforts in Pakistan. The International Human Rights Clinic, as I mentioned at the beginning, has been working with Salman and with Hafsa. Hafsa is actually a student in the clinic, on helping develop the standard operating procedures. And from the clinic's perspective, domestic violence, it's really actually one of several human rights problems that you find in every country, and it's a global community issue. For those of you familiar a little bit with U.S. law, our own Supreme Court ruled in 2005 that an order of protection did not create a property right, and a city couldn't be sued for failing to enforce an order of protection that actually resulted in the death of a woman's 3 children, I believe, after she had called it in. So domestic violence is sort of traditionally not taken seriously, and this mechanism that they are creating in Punjab is actually quite impressive. So let me call Ali up here to talk a little bit more about the kind of work that the clinic has been doing, and sort of, I think it'll also give a bit more detail about the sort of massive effort that's involved in really creating a center like this. And then we can have a conversation with Salman and open it up for questions.
Hi, so I'll just talk for a few minutes. So I'm Ali, and I've been working with Veer Awankyu, 3L, I'm a 2L here at the law school, and Hafsa as well, on the clinic side of helping Punjab implement this act. And so it's been a really interesting experience. I think, I'm sure you got a sense from Salman's presentation, it's this really ambitious law that has lots of moving parts. And so what we've been trying to do with the clinic is to make sure that when all these moving parts are implemented on the ground, that they do so in as much as possible way that's very consistent with and kind of embodies international human rights standards. So we've been trying to kind of approach it in this nitty-gritty fashion, looking at each of these the violence against women centers that Salman was talking about employ lots of different officials, from the person who when a woman walks in to submit a complaint, from the person who takes that complaint and kind of greets her, to the psychiatrists and psychologists she speaks with, to the doctors and the lawyers there, and then the police who investigate the matter, and then she can go on to a shelter home in some cases, and so there's the staff there, and then it's kind of the staff overall and the managers. So there's dozens of different staff members at these centers, and so we've been basically looking at different best practices from that the UN has promulgated and different international organizations, as well as different best practices from these one-stop shops that other countries have been working on for a couple of years, to try to make sure that it's once it gets going, that the really impressive vision that they have for creating the law happens on the ground as well. Another interesting part of that, so with the clinic in general, that's kind of how we approach these problems, or approach most of our projects. With this one too, we've been working with a couple of faculty members and students in the social work side of the school, because of course these centers in the law are trying to prevent violence against women and eradicate that, and part of it is kind of trying to make sure that all the staff members just do their job to so that the prosecution goes effectively. But also, we're trying to make sure, as everyone wants to make sure that all the rules recognize that the women who come here will generally be, have had these violent incidents happen to them, will be traumatized, and so we've been trying to create these rules that both implement a human rights approach to the law, as well as one that's trauma informed and uses best practices in that area as well. So that's what we've been working on this year. And yeah, we're really excited for the first center to open up next month, and hopefully as it gets going, we'll be able to help and kind of see how the efficacy of it and success, and fine tune the work we've done so far as it gets underway.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. So we can open it up for questions, but I wanna start our discussion with what I think is actually the elephant when you're dealing with domestic violence related initiatives. In most societies, there is some form of gender inequality. I'll just go ahead and say all. And there are these sort of divisions between what we think law and policy should address and shouldn't address, right? So there's the private space, which generally has been left for regulation in sort of informal and community mechanisms, and arguably that's led to an environment that has actually promoted domestic violence and kind of allowed gender inequality dynamics to actually to flourish. I think one thing that's actually very impressive about the system is there's been an attempt to kind of isolate it from all of those things, right? To sort of put the best case, best possibility, staff that actually understand the problem in sort of an inequality context, to isolate, the system from any kinds of corruptions or any kind of ineffective sort of elements of the law. And I think that's likely to lead this mechanism to be successful at the outset. I guess my question is, in the long term, what do you see as the sort of the goals, the challenges, the barriers, the things that really need to be addressed for domestic violence to really become, a real crime in a culture's eyes, so that the culture itself kind of takes it on? And this is a challenge we have here as well. And I think it's something that no one's quite figured out how to solve, because we can create a rule of law that's very effective, but when you really look at domestic violence and why it isn't addressed, it's in the enforcement, right? It's because the police see cases and don't actually think they're that serious, or they try to convince families to work it out themselves, or women are discouraged from ever filing complaints in the first place, or the women who do file complaints, when they get to court, actually are met with a lot of resistance and disbelief. So all of those things, which are really kind of these nuanced dynamics that are difficult to take care of in law, actually are what create the problem and what create a situation in which domestic violence is difficult to deal with. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on that.
Sure. See, when you talk about Pakistan, the challenges that we are anticipating are mostly the mindset that we're going to face, because nobody ever saw this domestic violence thing as actually a crime. It was always considered as something which is happening in the house. It should stay in the house. It should never be discussed. And it's the same in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. We all face the same issues. And actually, even if you think about United States or UK or EU, there are a lot of people who still do not talk about this, and they don't even report these kind of cases. So in Pakistan society, where we have a huge chunk of population which is uneducated, the biggest challenge will be the change of the mindset. But how we're trying to change that is because we are trying to get away from this this segment that it is only a women-related issue. We're trying to show it as an actual crime which affects everyone and not just the women involved. So we're trying to engage the children in it. We're trying to engage the son, the brother, the husband, and we're trying to show a holistic picture that how it affects. Just like I give you an example of the terrorism incidents and the link of the violence against women. So that is a very huge angle that has never been touched. There's been tremendous studies happening since this war on terror started, or all of these wars started. So, but nobody has actually looked at those from this angle. So what we're hoping to do is change that mindset that violence against women should not be considered violence against women. It should be considered violence. It should be considered as an affront to the society, the normal society value in which everyone's lives is precious. Because what we have learned is if there's a feminism movement, or if there is a pro-man movement, if you want to call it, it falls victim to its own merits, just like I said, because then people start to look at it, oh, it's a women issue. It's a guy issue. But if you look at it as a humanity perspective, if you look at it as a whole society, on a society's perspective, then people start to pay attention that yes, it can affect me as well. So we're trying to change that mindset. During the course of this legislation, I was called on many TV interviews, and I was asked point blank that are you a feminist, or are you, you believe in feminism? So my answer was the same, that it's not about feminism. It's about basic human rights. Like a girl or a guy just have a basic right to be secure. It's as simple as that. Regardless of they're married, regardless if they are single, regardless if they're working, studying, or simply just at their house, they have a right to be secure. So I think we have passed through this decades and decades of these movements which have sort of cornered us into thinking that this is women issue or a guy's issue. So when we start to come back from that and we look at it as holistically, I think that will be the best way to tackle that.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because, you know, something that we discuss here at the law school when we're talking about human rights and women's human rights in particular is why is the question, is violence against women a problem or illegal, and why isn't the question, why is there a difference between assaulting a random person on the sidewalk and assaulting someone in your home who happens to have a female gender, right? Like, why is there a difference? Why would law even treat that differently? So I think that's a very, I think, very powerful way to think about it. Why don't we, if you can move a little closer to those who are being filmed, why don't we open up for questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. I had a couple of questions, about the law, and then moving on. Firstly, throughout the talk, when you talked about domestic violence, you kept mentioning it as a crime, but in the law, in the act itself, you as well mentioned that it's not marked as a crime. And for me, that seems a little bit problematic because what it seems to, from where I stand, it seems that women will still have to seek justice under PPC provisions of criminal intimidation, etc. Secondly, you said that we shouldn't mark it as a women's crime as opposed to just a crime in general. And I was wondering why in the act then you would choose to define the aggrieved party only as a woman when domestic violence can affect many other vulnerable parties as well.
Correct.
Thirdly, why in the context that you provided of Pakistan would you penalize false complaints given what we saw with the Zina ordinance and how women had to enter enter prisons in like large numbers because if they couldn't justify it or provide enough evidence, then they would be imprisoned.
Sure.
The fourth point I had, or my concern was, when you define violence in the Act, you list a number of sections. Two of the things which I didn't understand was why sexual violence and oppressive behavior weren't defined, because I think that would be important. And the last point was that why would you list these as opposed to saying many different things that affect battered women, because I think that would be better in adjudication. The last point, which is more of a question now, sorry, is what is the work actually that you're doing on shelter homes? Because in Pakistan, Darul Amans are generally more jail-like.
Yes.
And that's not a place where you would want to place a woman who's already suffering these things. So are you expanding them? How are you treating them? And also, what's the provision in how do you get families together? Because dependent is defined as somebody under the age of 12. And I'm wondering why you wouldn't want to keep the rest of the family together with the woman. And so.
Sure.
I actually wrote those down in case you...
Yes. So let's go backwards, like shelter home. Shelter homes, yes, you're absolutely right. That's why this violence against women centers, one of the major component is the shelter part, which is a total departure from how Darul Aman looks like in Pakistan. As you can see the building, they are, they have been redesigned and they have been given more like a hostile kind of environment in which there will be no restriction on their movement, because in Darul Aman, the first issue we always faced, that when a victim was there, she could not leave that place till she had a proper, authorization. So in this, we are not doing that. We're simply providing her a secure location in which nobody can come in, but she can go as she likes. So this is an attempt to reform all the Darul Amans, because with this law, we are establishing these centers in all 36 districts of Punjab. So this is going to be the headquarters, but all the 35, we will be using existing Darul Amans to refurbish them and make them into a violence against women center. So first, for that second question was that why we have listed the crimes and why not keep it vague. That's
the different things that affect battered women, because it's not always the same thing.
See, when we started working on this legislation, it was such a big challenge, because when you start from scratch, there's like so many things happening, and I wanted to make sure that I can put in as much information as I possibly can, which is not defined in the CRPC and which is never discussed. So the sexual violence thing, the definition of sexual violence, I did not put it in there, because National Assembly was in the process of passing an honor crime bill at that time. And that's also true for the cyber. We did not define cyber because we left that for the interpretation of the National Assembly, because whenever there's a National Assembly law, it overtakes the, the provincial laws. So we wanted to leave that for that. And your second question was?
They were more comments.
Okay.
Domestic violence is not defined as a crime.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. See, we didn't want to do something which was already done in CRPC. I wanted to introduce civilian remedies. And the reason I did not declare that a crime, because of the same argument that I'm making, that it should be, it is already a crime if I try to assault someone. It is already a crime if I try to, abuse them. It is already defined there. So when I will put that in there, it will limit the scope of that crime. With the existing CRP sitting, if the issue is always implementation. Right now, Pakistan is the most heavily legislated, one of the most heavily legislated countries. But the issue is you don't see the implementation because the departments that are supposed to implement that are so corrupt and so inept that you simply cannot do that. So what I'm trying to do is with this center, it opens in March, even all those cases, of a simple assault, simple battery, simple, cyber crime, like sending someone a lewd text message. When we prosecute with this center and when everything works flawlessly like it's supposed to be, that will create a huge dent in itself. So I didn't want to redo things because Sindh and Balochistan did the same, and you can check the record, there's almost 0 convictions. So we wanted to make sure. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And why it was
false complaint penalty. When we were working with, I'm sure if you have worked with them, Asma Jahangir, Aurath Foundation, we collected a massive amount of data of false complaints. Because of the vagueness of the procedures, because of the cumbersome procedures, women were actually trying to abuse the system by submitting a false complaint just to get the guy to do what they wanted to do. For example, in child custody cases, in a divorce case, in a small domestic dispute case. So we wanted to make sure, and that was actually deterring the actual victims to come forward. So I wanted to make sure that we set a precedent that if anyone lodges a false complaint, and if somebody, slanders someone, they should be penalized, so only real victims come. But my eventual goal is once the system gets a little bit better and the deterrence is there, then we will actually kind of scale it down. But it was a necessary evil for today's scenario.
One thing I will say about the false complaints is this has been heavily debated in our team, and there are sort of concerns on many sides. I do think that in the standard operating procedures, there is a way to implement the mechanism such that it is not deterring women from coming forward because of the fear of punishment, or at least that will happen a lot less. And I think that ultimately, obviously there's been much written about the fact that punishment for false complaints actually does deter women from coming forward, especially in an environment where it's difficult to do so. Understanding the cultural context and also the concerns on that side, there is an effort to sort of make this mechanism, not deterrent, but also addressing some of the cultural concerns.
And I just the last point, that the reason I added a prosecutor before lodging of a FIR was for the same reason, so the prosecutor can assess the case and actually guide the police officer that if it's a legitimate case, and if it is, what clauses you should use, so the case doesn't fizzle away in the court. And then there's a psychologist also, which is assessing the victim while the complaint is being lodged. So we're trying to add as many safe safety nets to filter out false complaints, and so we don't have to register a case against them. We just simply refuse the FIR for that.
Other questions?
Yes.
Given how isolated we have to make the system because of the current problems with pre-existing systems, and what you said about the tendency of people to victim blame and the rejection, but the resistance of clerics and the fact that this is kind of considered more of a private issue, where is the support for this plan coming from? Is it one really powerful government official? Is it members of the public who are just were able to organize and they're organizing behind you now? Where's this coming from?
So the support was always provided by the chief minister, the chief executive, but obviously we had to take the parliament on board. It's a 300 plus members of the parliament. So that's why it took us 1.5 years to convince them. The history has been in Pakistan that whenever there is opposition, the government usually either doesn't talk to them or either scales back. So, but we did something different in this time. We engaged them, and we exhausted the process to an extent that in which either like, they accepted it or, they simply just, backtracked. So the support was available from the civil society, the support was available from the chief executive, and then eventually from the legislators who were working with us.
Hi, I'm a foreign exchange student from Pakistan. So like after seeing your presentation, like it feels really good to see what our country is doing for us. Yep. But like as living there, like people just think that, as you said, that they don't even consider it as violence. And like if you look at the rural areas, they don't know how to report, and secondly, they're not aware of anything. So how are you creating awareness for them?
Sure.
That they should report?
Sure, that's a good question. We are engaging UN Women and other organizations by doing street theater campaigns, seminars, different kind of activities, and what you call TV commercials, and mostly going to colleges, mostly going to schools. And the street theater campaign has been very successful. We did it in a lot of rural areas of Punjab, so in which they go to different villages and they try to act and they try to show what laws are present and how can they take advantage of that. So, but it's the uphill. It's going to take a long time. So,
And
let's
you
hope.
give presentation about Punjab. So, like, it's the problem all over Pakistan.
Yeah.
So, like, what is the government doing for other provinces like Balochistan, Sindh, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? So.
I work for Punjab government.
Well, still, like the Prime Minister and everyone. So, like, what do you think? Like, are they gonna have the same system in other provinces too?
We are trying for that. The honor crime bill was passed because the Prime Minister was very keen on it. It was passed 2 months ago, and we are pushing for this center to be replicated in all the provinces. And actually, the government of Norway, they contacted us, and they are taking this system to Oslo. So they will be replicating this, the one-stop shop in Oslo as well. So that's the goal, that to develop these centers in all around the world, not just Pakistan. So so victims can have one place. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for coming here.
Thank you.
You've done some great points, but I've still been wondering if there's any section in that law which basically touches upon the women who are living in the tribal areas in Pakistan. Like, they still have their jirga system, their own laws and legal rules.
Correct.
And there's a whole lot of stigma attached to women in those areas. So what are you guys doing?
See, it's a provincial law. We don't have, in Punjab, it's close to none, like, the tribal areas. So, but the jirga system is there, which is illegal. So that is why these centers will be the first deterrent to counter those jirga systems. But nationally, the national government is working on something like, I'm not aware of the proceedings of that, but I think it's in the pipeline of being considered. But I think they will do it after the election when they have some political capital, because right now this is the last year. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I worked in immigration law for 2 years.
Wonderful.
And from what I understand about the United States Violence Against Women Act is that even though it's called Violence Against Women Act, like, men can also apply
Yes.
under it. And so we had a case where we had done a couple of cases for women, but we actually had a man who we helped under the Violence Against Women Act, and they have certain protections for immigrants and that sort of thing too. So my question was, for the Violence Against Women Act in Punjab, is it the case that also men could apply for it, and is there a stigma against them applying if they've been abused in their household? And what protections are there for other groups, like maybe LGBT groups or other people who, bless you, might be stigmatized as well and might be fearful of coming forward to courts?
Sure. I think you asked a similar thing, like, and I forgot to, I'm sorry, to mention that, when we drafted this legislation, like, the protection for assault was already present. So we wanted to give women these certain specific protections that mostly they face, like protection order, residence order, and monetary order. Like, you'll hardly find a case in Pakistan in which some guy has been kicked out by his wife. or some of the wife is taking the wages of the husband, or a guy is seeking protection against rape from a girl. So these are tailor-made from the data that we collected from the issues on the ground. And that was one of the things that made this law unique, because it tackles the original problems that women were facing. As far as your question about the LGBT and other, this law specifically targets just women, and it does not cover any of that. And there was one more point that you raised about the minorities thing.
Well, I mean, like immigrants. So, for example, in the United States, I don't know how many people like moving to Pakistan to live there, but a lot of people are moving to the United States.
No, it's a totally different scenario. It's not the case. So this is specifically tailor-made for the issues that women were facing in a hostile environment. So this is why it was done mostly for them. And the definition, like I forgot to mention, in this law, there is no mention of the word male, husband, brother, or anything. This law is equally applicable on violence against women cases. So so we designed this accordingly that even if a woman is committing violence against women, she can seek protection. So it's not an anti-man law; it's anti-women violence against women law.
Time for a couple more questions. Yeah, go ahead. In the back.
Regarding the prevention side, you mentioned there's you are now teaching children about this kind of violence. I just have two questions. One, was this incorporated in their school curriculum? Now it's given as a class in the curriculum. And two, what are your efforts regarding grown men?
Regarding, I'm sorry?
Grown men.
Grown men, not children, but men in general.
Okay, sure. The chapters are added into the. No worries. The chapters are added in the Punjab textbook boards, which are the official books that are taught in the government schools in the province. So all of them will read it, and from 8th through 12th. And we slowly increase the intensity of the content from 8th grade to 9th grade to 10th to 11th to 12th with examples and with law, with different kind of things. And then with grown men, I mean, like it's about seminars, it's about education campaigns, and it's mostly deterrence. Like, you cannot change the mindset overnight. It's mostly deterrence. So, I mean, like, the most reason that men were committing these acts were they knew that they could get away with it, because the case usually took 1 year just to get processed. And then the will of a victim to file a case is 100% within 24 hours of the crime. As soon as the 24-hour passes and the society pressure comes in and other kind of pressures come in, then her will continues to drop. So that's why these centers are very important, that we try to do everything in 24 hours the moment we get the call, so the pressure stays. So if the person is trying to, whoever is watching, that this is happening, so they are actually deterred. So when it comes to grown men or grown women, like this is our strategy to make sure the examples are set in a right tone, that they don't do it.
These seminars do invite men and women.
Yes. We invite religious people. See, we engage them. Like, we ask them to present their point of view rather than shutting them out, because then they realize that there's a population which is away from their own seminaries and their own mindsets that actually believes that this is violence. So if you keep them in corner, they will keep on harping on the same thing. So you need to bring them into the mainstream, and you need to engage them and engage them and engage them. So then, they realize that, there's a other side to it as well.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
Nice.
I want to ask you about minors.
Yeah.
How you deal with minors that probably are not receiving support for their mothers in a case in which, that happens. Do you have a specific solution for them? How you deal with that?
Yes. Again, I think she brought this up as well. In the Act, we have defined minor as under 12. So, but in the shelter, when the victim seeks shelter, a girl of any age can live with her. So if she's 6-month-old or like 20-year-old or 50-year-old, she can still come with the mother or whoever she's coming with. The guys, the boys, we have a Child Protection Bureau in Punjab, which has been working since 2 years. So we have shelter homes for children there. So we will steer the male child into those centers, or if they want to stay with the father or whoever they want to stay with, as long as the mother and the father agree. So then we will, send them there. So minors are catered to according to that. And the reason why we did not let the male child come into the shelter, because it's an all-female shelter, and in a country like Pakistan, conservative society, like it will be a nightmare if we, try to bring boys in the same kind of thing, or actually anywhere in the world. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you.